So with that, I'm gonna get started. So just the description is that we're going to be going through the application user guide, which is something I'm going to walk through pretty extensively to give you some real good background about using DOB Now and tips and things for design professionals as they use the system. So we're going to learn how to navigate. There's a lot of different terminology that we use throughout the process. So I'm going to go through all of those things so that we're all using the same terminology and understanding the process that way. And then also the different stages of filing goes through, because of course our goal is to get a letter of completion or a certificate of occupancy for all of our projects. So I will walk through the different stages in order to get to that final phase. So as I said, we're going to review the user guide. I'm going to go over lots of resources at the end so that if there were things that I didn't cover, but you want more information, it'll definitely give you some resources for you to look into. And there's a little quiz at the end so that make sure everybody's paying attention. This is for learning credit, I believe. And then we'll open it up for some questions. I did schedule this for an hour and a half. I think my presentation will probably go an hour, so we should have plenty of time at the end for everybody to ask questions and to dig into some of the topics that I went into during the presentation. All right, and with that, we're just gonna jump on into the user guide. The first thing I'm going to show you is where this user guide is, because I think that is important. So when you are on the DOB Now homepage right here, this is the homepage. There is a link here under Build for Resources. And most of the guides that I'm going to be showing you in this presentation, you can find them here by clicking on this page. And at the bottom of the page, there are all of these helpful links. And one of them is the user guide. And this is the guide that I'm going to be going through today. And I will mention a lot of these other resources when I'm doing the presentation, but this is where you can find what I'm going to be looking at first. So with that, we have our user guide. And it's pretty extensive. We're going to not hit all the points, but we're going to take a navigation through what's there. And the first thing I want to go over is the application process, which for you is going to be a kind of an overview that maybe you don't need. Maybe it's too elementary, but I'm going to go through it because there are words and ways that we describe the process that I think are important for everybody to be using the same words, that we're understanding the whole process from beginning to end, and also just the different terminology. So of course, most construction work requires a permit from the Department of Buildings. And before you can get that permit, plans are filed. These are filed by a licensed professional engineer or a registered architect. And we often refer to all of these as a registered design professional, an RDP. And these plans are reviewed by a plan examiner at the Department of Buildings. And that review is to determine compliance with construction codes and zoning for the purpose of ensuring safety and that the proposed use and occupancy is permissible. So that is one path. You submit the plans, the engineer or architect submits those plans, and they are reviewed by the Department of Buildings. Another path that those plans can go on is the professional certification program. And this is where the RDP certifies that the proposed work complies with all of the laws, code, and regulations. We call this ProCert, and the department conducts audits of professionally certified applications. So the larger scope of works that some projects have may require a site safety plan, which would require hiring site safety professionals, and the site safety plan is reviewed by the department as well. There are some types of work that do not require plans. These are electrical work and applications that we call limited alteration applications, which includes minor plumbing work that is filed by a plumber, a fire suppression contractor, or a fuel burner installer. So the different types, just to review, there's plans that are either reviewed by a department plan examiner. There are some plans that are submitted ProCert. There are sometimes site safety plans as well that are submitted for larger projects. And then there are some types of work that do not include plans, which are electrical work or limited alteration applications. So then once your plans are approved, if you need them, the contractor requests a permit. They file the permit application to obtain the permit, and they are usually issued within 2 business days or sometimes less. This is the quickest part of the process, is the permit application. There is a quality assurance review that happens on them, but it's a very quick process. And then for electrical and limited alteration applications, the permit is issued at the time the application is submitted to the department. There is no review. So as soon as that information is entered and it's submitted, the permit is available right away and the work can begin. I will put in this reminder because it's always a good one, I think, that construction work requiring a permit must be performed with a permit. Failure to obtain a permit will result in the issuance of a work without permit violation and a stop work order, which require resolution and carry significant financial penalties. And violations for work without a permit are issued to the property owner. All right, so we submitted our plans if we needed them. We have a permit. The next step is inspections. So once the work is completed, the contractor requests a development inspection from the department. They do that in our system called DOB Now inspections, or depending on the type of work, a RDP can perform and certify the final inspection. And these inspections are performed to ensure the work was performed safely and in keeping with approved plans. Once an inspection passes or is certified by the RDP, this is the technical report tab that's in DOB Now, and the RDP goes in and certifies what's called the final technical report, and that signs off the permit. Once the permit is signed off, so the 2 ways to sign off a permit is either that there's a TR final on the filing that's been certified, or there's a pass final inspection in the inspection system. Those are the 2 ways that a permit can get signed off. Then the RDP can request, or the owner can request, a letter of completion, or if the work requires a certificate of occupancy, then you go through the certificate of occupancy process. Additionally, for certain projects involving structural, fire protection, plumbing, or mechanical work, there are other inspections that are required, and those are done by a special inspector that is approved by the department. So that's a different stakeholder that I wanted to mention that it could be part of your filing. So this is all done in DOB Now, which is what we're going to jump into here to see the different parts of the process and get us going with filing. So the first thing you do when you submit an application is you're determining what kind of filing it is. And there are initial filings, which is the first filing on a project. So I'm doing work on a property and I create my application in DOB Now, and that's my initial filing. That is my I-1. And then if I have additional scope of work that is on that property that's related to this project, I could go in and I could create a subsequent filing. And subsequent filings in our system have the extension with an S, and it can go through the entire alphabet. So you can have as many subsequents as you possibly need. But it starts off with S1 and then works its way through. We very much encourage you to do subsequent filings. Subsequent filings will go to the same plan examiner or team, and the record management fees are paid on the initial filing filing only, and it's also beneficial to have one job number to connect all the work on a project. So creating a subsequent filing is definitely something we want you to do, and I will let you know that it works as a separate filing. So if you have a subsequent filing, it can be a different review type. Your initial could be plan exam, your S1 could be ProCert, or any combination of those. And once you submit a subsequent, it gets its own LOC. It is a separate application. You can do your own inspections, your own PAAs, everything is separate. It can have a different applicant. The RDP that's on the I-1 can be different on any of the subsequents. It does not need to be the same. The only thing that's hooking them all together is that they are part of the same project and they have the same job number.
So if I'm doing a plumbing as part of a general construction, I can do that as a subsequent as opposed to a separate application?
Yes. Yes. That's what we would like you to do. So yes.
Okay, great.
Hi, Jody. It's Ida. I just want to point out also, if you can just reiterate to everyone that additionally, you can have a subsequent, like if the initial application is a GC, you can have another GC as a subsequent. If there's another applicant or if there's another scope of work that falls under the GC for the same job, because this just came up at the industry meeting. So I just wanted to reiterate that.
Yes, that is true. Good point. Thanks, Ida. And so I will show you in the system how you create the subsequent in a moment. But I wanted to also let you know about post-approval amendments. So if you're doing a filing and after it's been approved, you need to make changes, that's when you do a PAA. And the numbering for PAAs, it starts with a P1, it goes all the way through P9, and then it starts off with the beginning of the alphabet at A. So you can have as many PAs that you need, but that's the numbering system that happens in the letter system. When you create a job filing in DOB Now, you're going to the dashboard, and this is where I will kind of give you so you're logging into DOB Now, you're coming here, you're doing plus job filing, and we're going to go over these in a moment, but this is where you would start if you were creating an initial. If you're going to create a subsequent, what you would do is go over here to your search, and you can search by the job number if you know it, or you could search by the bin number, and you could put in the bin number and it will pull up all the filings on that bin. Actually, I could pull up a bin number and show this for you, but I'm going to go to the dashboard. So that's where you could find it. And then once you pull up the job filings, it's from here that you would be able to, hold on, just need one that's in the right status. Select subsequent filing. And this can be when the initial is in pre-filing. The status of the initial can be anything, basically, and that's when you can create the subsequent. I will let you know that if you're doing a very big project, like an NB or an Alt-CO, that has a lot of details that are going to be on that initial filing, you're going to want to complete the initial filing as much as you can before you create those subsequent filings, because there is data from the initial that trickles down to the subsequent. So the most information that you can possibly put in the initial before you create that subsequent is what we recommend. We're working on some system updates to make that a little better. But right now I can tell you, if you have a very big project where you're doing a lot of information with the zoning information and everything that needs to go in, it's recommended that you submit everything on your I-1 as much as you can before you start creating those subsequents, so that all of the information trickles down into your subsequents. But this is how you create a subsequent, and this is also where you would create a PAA. But as I mentioned, if you're looking for whether there is an initial on your property, you could come in here to search and do the bin search and search for any filings that are on that bin and determine if there's an I-1 that you could create your subsequent on. All right. So then once you come into DOB Now, we saw that screen where you're going to create the job type. So the job type in DOB Now is either an alteration. And when you start with an alteration, it's going to ask you these questions. So I'm doing an alteration, and we do have the system reminder in here to encourage you to do a subsequent. So in case you forget, it's going to tell you again here that please do a subsequent if you can. So then there's these questions here, and these will determine what kind of filing you're doing. So is it required to meet new building requirements? Is it inconsistent with the current certificate of occupancy? So these are all creating Alt-COs. Is this an alteration in occupancy, a major change to exits, a number of stories? So if you select no to all of these questions, I'm just going to select no here so that we can get here. Then it's going to show you the job type as alteration. So if I had selected yes here and no to all of these, then it gives me the job type as Alt-CO, new building with existing elements to remain. So this is where it's determining the job type from here. So other job types that we have are full demolition, which is fully in DOB Now. So all of the demolition jobs are done here. Limited alteration, which I mentioned at the beginning, is that for limited scope, that's plumbing, oil burner installations, fire suppression piping, all of that's done through this limited alteration tab, and it needs to be done by a plumber, a fire suppression contractor, or oil burner installer. Those are the only ones that could be the applicant. A new building, of course. And then no work in DOB Now is for place of assembly and temporary place of assembly. Those are the only no work applications that are filed currently in DOB Now. If you have an Alt 1 no work, you're still doing those in Biz. But if you're doing a place of assembly, a temporary place of assembly, that's what we call no work, and that's what you're doing in DOB Now. All right, so in the guide that we're going through there gets into more details about alteration, what the different types are, the full demolition, limited alteration, new building, no work. All right, and so then as I mentioned, there were those, as you saw, there were those two questions. Is this application for a small business? If you were to say yes to this, then a small business tab will appear on the filing where you can provide more information. We're defining small business as something that a business that employs fewer than 100 people. And when you select small business, it adds an additional stakeholder. So the small business owner can also be a stakeholder on the filing, just like the owner. It's another person that can go in and take action on the application. It also routes it to a different team at the Department of Buildings who does the review. And if there is a work without a permit civil penalty on the project, and it is for a small business, there is no L2 required. So that eliminates the need for an L2. So that's the different reasons that you would pick small business. Another question that comes up, is it an approved project under the Major Projects Developments Program? This is what we call MPP. And if you say yes to this, then it goes through a pre-development consultation at the Development Hub. And once it becomes, if you choose to participate in that, then it functions as a project within DOB Now. It has a project number and a different dashboard where you can see the different parts of that project. And if you need more information about MPP, there was a service notice and it was a rule. So you can get more information there. All right, so now we have created our project and we have determined the job type, and it's an alteration of some kind. So now you have to have work types. And these are all of the work types that are currently in DOB Now. And there are 2 more that are going to be added very shortly. That is solar and green roof. Those are coming soon. You'll see them. Oh, and sorry, 3, suspended scaffold is the other one that is coming. So when you log into DOB Now in a couple of weeks, you're going to see those 3 new work types, which will be solar, green roof, and suspended scaffold. And you can combine file some of these work types. So sometimes you have multiple work types that you want on a filing, and you can do that in one filing in DOB Now. But we have limitations on this. We know that some of these limitations are not great. So we're working on them. But right now, currently how the system works, these are the ones that you can combine together. And the system guides you through this. I'll just show you that. So when you're doing a job filing and you're saying it's an alteration, and then you decide what work types you want to do. If I pick fence, it will allow me to pick shed and scaffold. And if I pick GC, it will allow me to pick earthwork, foundation, mechanical, and structural. So it's guiding you as to which work types you can combine file together.
Jody.
Yeah.
Is there a mechanism for going through a process like this without actually filing a job?
You mean you want to kind of play around with it? So
Sure.
You could create a filing, and as long as you don't pay for it, once you're done, you can delete it.
Okay.
So just don't pay.
All right, great.
is what I would tell you.
I prefer to do that all the time, but you know.
So when you're on your dashboard, if you have something in pre-filing that is not paid for and you go over to the action button, there will be an option there to delete, which is right here.
All right, great.
And it's gone.
Thank you.
Yep. So as I mentioned, it will prompt you as to what can be combined filed, and I list them here for you as well. And then every work type has sometimes different subcategories, and I list here all of them, but you will see them as soon as you select it in a filing. I will let you know that for general construction, there is a new subcategory that is coming as well with those other work types that I mentioned, and that's electrical storage systems. So in November, when you go and select GC, you will see this additional subcategory, which is electrical storage systems. So that's coming soon. But I did include in this guide all of the different subcategories so that you don't have to play in the system necessarily. You could just come to this guide if you're questioning what subcategory or which scope of work falls into which work type in DOB now, if that's a question that you're having. This might be helpful because you can see all of the subcategories in one place. So hopefully that will be a good resource for you. All right, so now we selected our work type, and then what you need to select is your review type. I'm just going to go back here for a second. So I did my job filing. I answered my questions so that I could come up with what type of job it is. Then I picked a work type. I'm just going to do GC here. And then it's going to ask me for my review type. And these were things that I had mentioned in my beginning overview. So if you are going to have the Department of Buildings do the review with a plan examiner, you're going to pick standard plan. And if you're going to do it yourself as the RDP, you're going to select professional certification. And once I select these, the system warns you, you can't change this. So as I mentioned, you could go through and as long as you didn't pay for it, you can delete it. But if you are creating a filing and you want to change any of this information that I just entered, this is your point where you can't go back. So make sure that all of these details are things that you are sure about. It reminds you, and then it will allow you to continue. So just a reminder again that these are things that can't be changed once you say yes.
Jody, if you complete the application and you don't want to file it, can you save it any place or you have to delete it?
So once you get to the end where you're trying to get the certificate of occupancy, if that's something you're doing, you will need to remove the pre-filing application. But pre-filing applications are things the Department of Building does not see or care about until at that very final moment of when you're trying to get a C of O on the property. So technically you could just keep it there for as long as if you wanted to just have it. Because once it's in pre-filing status, we don't see it. Department of Buildings doesn't take any action on that application.
Oh, thanks.
So I'm going to say yes, and then this is going to take me into my application. And I'm going to go through the different fields that are here. So one thing I wanted to mention is that I do have this filing statuses guide, and this gives the status of gives a rundown. I'm going to go here. Sorry. So where's the statuses guide? Oh, it's right here. So there's this guide, and if you're ever questioning, I'm gonna make that bigger. There we go. What do the different statuses mean? Because when you are in a job filing, there is a status. And once I populate information, it's going to show right here what the job status is. And I'm actually going to go into a job that is a little bit more filled out so that you can see this information better. Hold on one second. All right, so this is a pre-file job. Great. And so you see the status bar at the top, and you also see here you can see the job status. And in this case, it is pre-filing. And so what does that mean? So there is that guide that I was just showing. Right here, that gives you a description of all of these different statuses. So if you are in a filing and you want to figure out where it is in the process, this status guide will help you. But the other thing I wanted to show you is, and also it gives the equivalent of what it is in biz. So if you are a very familiar biz user and you want to kind of know what this means when you go into DOB Now, what the equivalency is, this guide really walks you through it. So that's a good resource to have. But in terms of DOB Now, this status bar is something that you should definitely take a look at, because these circles will fill in every step of the way. So as you get to the next phase, so pre-filing means that the Department of Buildings has not looked at it at all. You've created it, but you haven't submitted it. But then once you're submitting it, then it goes to the chief plan examiner to assign it. Then it goes to a plan examiner to review it. And then it goes back to the chief to do the final review before it is approved. So it's giving you the status along the way, and the circle will fill in each time it goes to the next part of the process. There will be a white check mark when it is complete. So it's here, and then once it's assigned, it'll get a white check mark. The thing that's most important for you to know as the applicant is that if there is a red exclamation point in this bar, that means that the Department of Buildings does not have it. It is sitting with you as the applicant and needs to be resubmitted in order for us to take any action. So if you come into a job filing and it's in objection status and there is a red exclamation mark on it and you're wondering why the Department of Buildings hasn't done anything, why this application hasn't been approved, it's because we don't have it. It's sitting with the applicant, and it needs to be resubmitted in order for the Department of Buildings to take action on it. So I just wanted, it's a helpful reminder, I think, to everybody when you're trying to figure out where an application is in the process, that part of it. Okay, so we have the statuses, and now we're going to navigate the actual filing itself. And so I guided you through this pretty extensively. Yeah, sure.
If I can interrupt, you said it means you don't have it, but actually what it means is that you've completed your phase and you've passed it back to the architect. You raised an objection and you sent it back to them to do something.
That's right.
You still have the application.
Right.
But waiting for action by the architect or engineer.
I say it that way because I think sometimes the confusion is that people want it approved or they want us to take action on it, and we can't. Yes, we can see it. It is an existing application with the Department of Buildings, but the Department of Buildings cannot take action on it if it's sitting on your dashboard and not on the Department of Buildings dashboard.
All right, thank you.
That's the distinction I was trying to make. Yeah, but yeah. Any other questions? The statuses I think are a good one. So if there are any other questions, we could take them, or I'll just keep going. All right. So navigating the filing. The first part, of course, is that you have to have a location. So you enter this information. I suggest searching the property profile in BIS to ensure that you're putting in all of the correct data here. And there may be the case where you get that it's an invalid address, or the project you're working on doesn't have an address yet. And so that's when you create a temporary bin, which we call a T-bin. It's created when there's already an existing bin and the applicant wants to file plans to demolish an existing building and build a new one in its place. So you would need a new bin for that. Or if you entered an address and it doesn't exist because the either address is not found for the building, the lot is vacant, the bin is obsolete, or the bin is a dummy bin, all of these things might require you to create a T-bin. And so T-bins are created in DOB Now. They require that you submit confirmation of the address from the Topo Bureau at the Borough President's Office, and that you also submit a stamped and signed PD1 plot diagram form that's stamped and signed by the Borough President. And the way that you do that in DOB Now is you go to the dashboard, it is a request, and you see here temporary bin. And so that's how if you need a temporary bin for a project, this is where you would do it. So then you've entered your location information. So now you need to enter your stakeholders. Everybody needs an e-filing account. Hopefully that's not news. But if you have an owner that you're working with that you're adding to an application, they will need an e-filing account as well. I give this link for if you need information about how to do that. But setting up an e-filing account is the first step to associating anybody with an application. So the applicant and owner are entered into an application, and the owner type is what determines if a application will be considered fee exempt. So if you're selecting the owner type as nonprofit, New York City agency, or other government-owned or NYCHA HHC, then you will upload an ACRIS report that shows that it's fee exempt, and that will remove the fees from the application. I can show you that real quick. So I'm here. I entered my location information. Then I would put in my stakeholders, and right here with the owner type, this is where you're determining if it's a fee exempt application by the owner type. And then you select that one that is, then when you go to the document section, it's going to have a ACRIS. I think we call it a fee exempt document, to upload that documents, fee exempt supporting documents. So that's where you would upload it to show proof that it is a tax exempt property.
Is there a mechanism for nonprofits that are renting spaces or that have just purchased a house, but it doesn't show up in DOF yet?
No, it's you have to do the DOF proof. That's the proof that we have to look for. You
see.
could once they got the nonprofit status for the property, then you could do a PAA and you could change you could do a supersede and you could change the owner to be a different, and then you could change the filing to have a different owner type.
And get our money back.
Then you would ask for a refund. Yeah.
Yeah.
We know how fun that is, but yes, that would be the process.
Yeah. All right. Well, that's a glitch in the system that should change, because I do a lot of nonprofit work. They do a lot of rentals, a lot of leases, and they end up forking over a lot of money that they don't have to.
So there is a fee deferred process that was in BIS that is not something that has been built into DOB now. So we do, it's mostly for HPD projects that this scenario was something that the BIS system was trying to accommodate for, but the actual, what you're talking about is indeed something that's not currently in DOB now. So yep, that's something that we can take back. All right, so we entered the applicant and owner. You can also enter a filing representative. We also have a field here for delegated associates. So this applicant, owner, filing rep. If you add a delegated associate to the job, this is another licensee or a class 2 filing rep. And when they are added to this application, then they can attend appointments and they can take other actions on the filing. So if you are working with multiple professionals that are working on a job, they can be added as delegates to it, and they can also be a part of your application. So just putting that out there, that's a sometimes useful thing to be able to add to a filing. Okay, so now we have all of the information included about our stakeholders, and now we're going to populate the information in the application. So the first thing that we're selecting is whether it is new work or legalization. Here I spell out how it works for when you select legalization. This is according to the rule in the code, but I wanted to make sure that everybody understood how it works, and this is helpful. This guide will always be here. So if you need to look back as to how you should do it, it's here, but I'll talk through it for a moment. If legalization is selected and there is no oath summons, if there's no work without permit on a bin, then the system is going to charge a $600 or $6,000 fee, depending on the building type. And that's added to the filing fees as a legalization fee. If legalization is selected and there is an oath summons number for work without permit on the bin, and you select yes to the question, are there any oath summons related to the work? And then you enter the violation number, then there's the 600 or 6,000 doesn't populate as a fee on the filing. What you're doing is then paying the civil penalty for work without a permit. And that's done as an L2 fee. So if you select yes, that you selected legalization, you select yes, that there is an oath summons, and then you put in the oath summons number. When you go to do the permit, then you're going to be required to do an L2. And an L2 is when you're requesting for override, reduction, or waiver of civil penalties, but it's also when you're just paying the civil penalty. So when you do the L2, the system is going to calculate what the fee is for the work without permit, and you'll submit that with the L2. You're not going to pay the $600 or the $6,000 fee. And then just a couple of things to know: when you select legalization, that means that there is a no work permit that is issued, and there's not any post-approval amendments allowed. So when you're submitting an application for legalization, we're assuming that you are only giving us the information that is needed about that filing and that no amendments are going to be needed and that there is no work that is happening on this application. You still have to pull a permit, but that permit is a no work permit. So just wanted to give that reminder of how the system works.
That would also be for a plumbing permit?
Yep. That's right. If the work type is selected as legalization and the work type is plumbing, it works the same way. That's right. So another question that is under this section is the work is being done to legalize work without a permit listed as a violating condition in a request for corrective action, which is called an RCA that's issued by DOB. So there was a service notice. This is the homeowner relief program. So if they haven't had any work without permit or violations on the property, when they get this first one, they are given more time to resolve it before a actual violation is issued. So they're receiving a RCA. And so if you select yes to this, then they provide the complaint number. And it's important that it's hooked together because in order for them to resolve the RCA and not get the work without permit at the actual violation, they have to prove that they resolved it. So if you need more information, this was also a rule and there was a service notice about the program itself, but there is a question in the application to indicate that. So when you are in a filing and you have this option to select new work or legalization, this question is pre-populated by what you selected before we got here. This is grayed out. Anything that's grayed out means that you have already made this selection and you can't change it because remember I said at the beginning, once you create the application, it's reminding you that you can't change certain things in order to be able to move on. So these are the things that are now grayed out when you go into the application. So we had already selected this as standard plan. This is a GC filing. And for a GC filing, this is the only work type where it allows you to choose whether the Department of Buildings or the registered design professional is going to do the final inspection. Other work types, it's already predetermined by the work type who has to do the final inspection. So if it's something that requires a TR final, the RDP to do it, that will already be populated on the application. But for general construction, there is the choice of who gets to do it, and this is where you're selecting that. This is something that can be changed on a PAA. So if you had initially decided that the Department of Buildings was going to do the inspection, but then you change your mind and you want the RDP to be able to do it, you can come in here and do a PAA and change that option. But if you're doing a general construction application and you're wondering why when you go into DOB Now inspections that you don't have the option to select to do the inspection, it's because of this option that was selected on the application.
Jody, may I interrupt for a second? Go
Sure.
back to legalization.
Yeah.
On a project where a work without permit violation was issued, it went to ECB, they paid, but then the owner decides that they're going to take out whatever identified work there was and build something completely different. Is that still a legalization?
No, that's work. You're doing work. Yeah.
Thank you.
You don't want to select a legalization unless you are legitimately doing no work. Yeah.
Okay.
So it could be the case that part of your application, I don't think it works for this scenario, but there are probably situations where there is part of the work that is legalization, and then you could do a new filing for new work. But you just want to make sure that the scope of what you're including in the legalization application is the no work part of that scope.
So it would be better to separate the legalization part from the new work as opposed to using the S2 or the L2, I mean, to reduce it to like only half or something like that.
Right.
Okay. Thank you.
Sure. Okay, so this part is grayed out because we selected it first. These two questions about small business and MPP, you can change them once you are here at this part of the application. So if it's not grayed out, you can change it. So I just wanted to point that out to you. And then we had already selected the work type as GC, so you can't change that. You can't add a work type and you can't remove a work type. Once you have a work type that's been selected in the application, that's what this application is for, and it can't be changed. So if you, after you created this filing, decide that you also need structural as a work type, you would need to delete this application and start a new one. You will not be able to add a work type here. The same thing for plumbing, sprinkler, and standpipe. If you had selected plumbing, sprinkler, and standpipe, and you get here and you decide, oh, I don't need standpipe, you can't remove it here. It's part of the application. You'd have to delete it and start a new application. So the subcategories we had mentioned too. This is something that you can select. And then we're going to jump in here to additional information. There are some applications, there are some features in this filing review type that I'm showing right here that are different based on the work type. So for different work types, there are different questions that are going to be asked. And so I list them all here. So if it's antenna, it's going to ask you some zoning questions. If it's curb cut, it's going to ask you if it's a new installation or a curb restoration. So all of that information I have included here in the guide so that you don't necessarily have to play around with an application. But every work type might have something else that it's asking you for. All right, so then we go into the additional information section. This is where you enter the estimated job cost. This is fees for alteration projects are based on the project's construction cost. So whatever you enter in this field is going to help to determine the fees for the filing. So I wanted to include that information there. And then I'm giving you a lot of description about the other fields that might pop up. I want to give this to you as a resource. I'm not going to jump through every single option that you might be adding to an application. But if you get a question on a PW1 on this part of the application, and you're not sure what it's asking you for or why it's there, this guide is your resource. It will hopefully give you the information you need and explain what each question is for. So I'm not going to walk through it now. I will let you know that this in conjunction, there was a new question that was added pretty recently. It is this one. Is this application filed in connection with a development, enlargement, or change in use as defined in the zoning resolution? This is showing up when you're doing an alteration filing. That is the work type FO, ST, SE, or EA. So foundation, structural, supportive excavation, or earthwork. If you're doing an alt, not an alt CO, not an NB, if you're doing an alt by itself with one of these work types, is going to require you to enter a related NB, alt CO, or alt with enlargement. And when you go to do the permit, the system is going to check to make sure that that NB, alt CO, or alt has an approved ZD1 and it has a site safety plan. So this is a newer question that was added to the system, so I wanted to point it out to you. But as I mentioned, if you have any questions about all of the different options that are coming up in this additional information screen, it's a little bit different based on the work type that you're selecting. Hopefully this will be a good guide for you. As well as the additional considerations and limitations. So this is going back to our application. This is, what we refer to as our PW1. So just a little recap, we have entered the location, we entered the stakeholders, we did the filing review type, what the work type the filing includes, that was this section. Then we had the additional information section, and then we get to additional considerations, limitations, or restrictions. This is quite similar from the paper PW1. So if you're really curious as to where something went that was on the PW1, it is generally in here. It just might be worded a little differently or in a different location, but that's hopefully what this guide is walking you through. So under additional considerations, you select whether it's a landmark, and you select whether review is requested under which building code. I'm going to point you to another resource here, because with the 2022 construction code, there were different options available for what code you can select, and it's based on the type of filing, the job type, the filing date, and the work type. So there's a matrix in here that is good to know. There's a guide This is the 2022 construction codes update to DOB Now. So this guide will walk you through which code year, if you're having a question of why for some reason you can't select a code year that you think you can, or why in a subsequent filing a different code year is showing up that you didn't think was going to be the one that you were going to select, this guide will walk you through that. In the filing itself, this is where you're selecting the code year. So for here, I only have 2022, 1968 or prior to 1968, and that's because this is an alt GC, and those are the options that are available. But definitely look at the grid that I'm giving to you as a resource if you have more questions about why that is. So the other parts that are not changeable on an application, so I can pick whether it's a landmark or not, and then this is populated from the property profile, the landmark. So this is saying no because the address that I've entered is indicating that it is not a landmark. So this is based on the property profile. I'm able to select my code year, and then these questions up here, there's a note in here, job type has already been selected and cannot be changed in this section. So these were the questions that we answered when we first created the filing that determined whether it was an Alt-CO with existing elements to remain, or just an alt. And these cannot be changed once you're in the application, but they're included here so that the plan examiner and everybody who's reviewing the application can understand what was selected on the application. So that part can't change, but all of these you can, and there's lots of different questions in here. And as I mentioned in the previous section, all of the reasons for these questions and what it's asking you and why and what it triggers, that's all included here in the guide. So I'm not going to go through each one, but there is information here. Sometimes different work types require different questions in this section as well. So depending on your work type, you might be getting different questions that you need to answer. For instance, when you're doing earthwork, foundation, or supportive excavation or structural, you're going to get questions about the geotechnical peer review. When you're doing plumbing, it's going to ask you about the impact on the sprinkler standpipe system. Standpipe has a bunch of questions that are specific to standpipe only. So all of the questions are listed here and gives you information about what they trigger. All right. So going through other sections of the filing itself, this was the additional considerations, limitations, or restrictions. The next section is NYC ECC energy compliance. And these questions, if you say yes, that it's a landmark, then you don't have to do the energy compliance. But if I say no, then it's going to give me these questions. And based on my answers, it will determine whether an energy submission is needed. So if I select yes to any of these, then I'm going to get a new tab on the filing that's called energy, and then I'll need to submit energy plans for energy review. So that's based on the selections that are made in this energy compliance section. Then you have the job description. The job description is what is printed on the work permit. So it gives you 255 characters. The limitation in characters is because that is what can fit on the field in the work permit. So anything you add here will be printed on the work permit. Then you have the site characteristics. This is pretty much pre-populated based on what is in the property profile, but they can be changed. So it will pre-populate. But if you're doing a new building, of course, you can obviously put in, it will only show proposed, and you can indicate what these indications are. But many of these are coming from the property profile itself, but some of them can be changed if there is, because the property profile is often not 100% accurate. It's giving you the idea that it's in the area, but it might not be applicable to that actual property. You might have to look at the map to determine if it is actually in the tidal wetlands and et cetera. So these are fields that can be changed in the application, although it is initially populated from the property profile. Then you have the asbestos abatement compliance, which determines what kind of documents you may need for the application. So it might require the V5, it might require the ACP20. This is where you indicate which documents you're going to provide, or if you're going to have to provide the control number or certificate number. So those are the triggers for those different things, is your selections that you made in this section. And then there is a comment section, and that is for you to make any comments. It doesn't go on the permit. We have 6,000 characters here, so you could make lots of comments if you had to. This is where, if you're doing a PAA, you would add the details about what you're changing, so that the plan examiner knows when they're reviewing the application, the purpose for the PAA. So this comment section is for you to use and make use of in any way you need.
Jody, can you add more description in the comment part?
You can, for sure. I think the plan examiner is looking for that mostly in the plans themselves, but there is this opportunity here to add them in the comment section.
Right.
Okay, so that's the initial part of, that's the front of the PW1. Then there's other tabs depending on your scope of project. So zoning information, there are of course lots of different things that we're asking about for zoning that get reviewed. I'm not going to go too far into the details because this is of course very technical and why you all are RAs and Ps and know these things. But there is information about each section here and what they're asking for, so that if you're having specific questions, you can use this as a guide. I will mention that if you're wondering why your filing isn't showing the cost yet, if you're doing an application and you're putting in some of the information and the cost is not showing up yet, it's because you haven't entered the building type. I find that this is a little helpful piece of information, so I'm going to share it with you. So if you're coming in here and you're starting to do your application and you're trying to figure out what the cost is, or if you want the owner to be able to come in and pay as you're doing the application, it's because you haven't indicated the building type here on the zoning information. So if you're filling out the whole PW1 and you're like, let me just get this prepped and let's figure out what the fees are, but it's not populating, it could be because you need to go here into zoning and also select the building type, because that of course is one of the things that will affect the filing fees. So pointing that out here, but all of the information that is needed in these sections is outlined here in the zoning information guide.
I'd like to point out that this is a flaw in the way the program works. For instance, if it says one, two family in that selection, which has to do with the fees, but if you select other, it doesn't automatically switch it out of the 1, 2 family until you select another category. You see here it says building type 1 family. If you select that as other, it still stays as a 1 family until one of these others is selected, mixed use or not. And
so you're saying you have to say yes or no to this?
Yeah, you have to select that or it stays as a 1 family. And so that everything else is progressive in the program except for this section. In other words, when you select other, that it shouldn't stay as 1 family, but it does unless you select mixed.
What do you mean? What do you mean that it stays with 1 family?
It stays as 1 family unless you select misuse, yes or no.
Or not applicable.
If you leave it as not applicable, it goes it still shows in the filing as 1 family. If you look in the status, it stays the same.
Okay.
In other words, it's kind of like you're used to the program. Whenever you change something, everything else changes. But in this case, this particular section doesn't.
Got it. Okay, I'll take that back. Thanks. We'll look into it. Okay, so lots of information here about zoning that you can use as a resource. It does have the risk categories listed out. It has the occupancy classifications in this guide. It lists them for 2014. It gives you the guide for the prior to 2008, gives you the prior to 2022 code, gives you resources for finding them. So definitely use this as a resource. It also gives the multiple dwelling classifications listed that you are selecting. And descriptions of all the other different fields that are part of this zoning tab. And I will take back that bug that you're talking about for building type, but otherwise, hopefully this is working as intended, and this resource can be useful for you as you're figuring out the details of an application. So that moves us to the other parts of the application. We have the cost affidavit, which is the PW3, was back in the paper days. That was what was called the PW3. That's this tab here. That's where you're adding the initial cost details, and at the end of the job, that's where you go back and you add the final cost details, and those need to be added in order to get your letter of completion. So that's all done here in this cost affidavit tab. The other tab is the technical report. So on the technical report, if there were any any special inspections that had to be done, this is where it would be listed. Actually, I'm going to go here to a filing that has the technical reports that I want to show you. Here we go. I'm going to go here. This one should have it. Nope, because I need to change my selection. I'm going to make it as RDP. So now when I go to the technical report, I have a tier final. So just a little quick overview how this section works. The first, when you're creating the filing, it needs to be identified. So you would go into here and you would put in the applicant, the one who's going to be doing that inspection. They would put in their email address, their license type and license number, and then either you are that person, or if you're not that person and you're just entering in, then that person will then log in, they will identify, and then they will update the technical report. So the first step is for it to be identified. And then once the permit is pulled and the work is ready to be signed off, then that special inspector will come back in here and they will log in as themselves, and they will come in and they will do the same thing where they will edit the inspection and they will select the button to certify it. They will save it, and then it will show here as certified. So when you're looking at a technical report, you want to make sure that it's both identified. When you first create the filing before the permit can be pulled, it needs to be identified, and then it needs to be certified in order for it to be in order for the permit to be signed off. So those are the two things that you're looking for all of the things that are technical reports listed on this tab. They need to be first identified and then certified for the permit to be signed off.
Jody, on this section, is there somewhere to see the dates that these were identified or certified? Like when the required items used to list all the different inspections, and they had a date identified when it was actually performed?
Yeah, it's in here. You have to view the actual inspection, but there is a date that they're certifying.
So if you're not the inspector, just a filing rep, say, working on the project to try to track how things are being completed, you'd still have access to looking this up here?
I want to say no.
Right, that's what I found. No, and it's like I say, whereas before I used to go to the
you want to be able to see that.
And I could see how much is done and what isn't done.
Got it. Okay, maybe that's a field we need to add to the bar that you can see without having to click into it. Good one. Yep, take that back. Okay, so that's how technical reports work. And I wanted to point out that we do have this guide that's listed on that resources page that I had pulled up, which I have lost. Hold on a second. So one of the guides listed here is technical reports. And on this guide, it lists every technical report, which code section they're applicable for, which work types they are applicable for as well, and whether they are conditional or mandatory. So there are some technical reports that are going to populate based on the scope of work. And this guide will tell you if it's one of those. If it's conditional, it means that there's something in the application that you selected that then triggered this technical report. So sometimes if you're going through and you're trying to figure out why this popped up, this is a good guide for you to know. Or if you're trying to remove a technical report and it won't let you, it may very well be because it is mandatory, or something that you need to change as the selection in the application that will remove it, that it's not something that you were able to, that's not optional. It's not something that you could just change or remove just by selecting it. You know, there are reasons that some of these are popping up. So this guide will give you information about that. And also, if you're trying to figure out all of the available inspections, this is a good comprehensive list that can be useful as well. So the other part of an application is the document section, and I have another resource for that. So on here, there's document waiver and deferral options. So documents can be waived or deferred sometimes. So there are documents that are going, this is required documents. So in DOB Now, there are 2 sections in an application. So there are documents that are going to show up here as required. So these are ones that the system populates based on the information that has been provided in an application. These cannot be removed. They can be deferred or they can be waived sometimes. That's why this guide is useful for you. So this guide is letting you know if it can be waived or if it can be deferred. And if it is something that you're requesting it as part of the application. So I don't know if any of these, oh, this one is. So if it is a document that is waivable, it's going to show up here on my action button and I can request that waiver. But anything that's showing here in required documents, the system is populating based on what was selected in the application. And your options as the applicant is either to request to waive it or defer it. And deferring means that right now this OER notice to proceed is required prior to approval. Let's say I want to make it required prior to LOC. When I go in here, I can request to, well, it's not letting me, I could request to defer it if it was a deferrable document. And that would allow me to say that I don't want to require it prior to approval, but I do need it, but I'm going to require it prior to LOC. So that's where all of this functionality is. And then additional supporting documents is where you as the applicant can tell us what documents you're providing. That's the difference between required documents and additional supporting documents. As a required document, the system is populating these here based on what's selected in the application. You can request to defer it or waive it. Can't remove it from here. A plan examiner cannot add something here either. This is dictated by the system. What you do have control over is the additional supporting documents, and that's where you can select what can be added. You can name a document, you can do anything that you need to here, but not in this required documents section. And so this guide that I was pointing out for you, it does list all the different options that are available. Whoops, sorry, wrong window. Here we go. All of the different options that are available for each document that could possibly be listed as a required document. So this is a comprehensive list of all possible required documents. It tells you which work types they're applicable to. It tells you the system is determining which stage it's required, and then whether it can be waived or deferred. So that's all in this resource here.
Okay, so something that I've noticed is that I don't know what a CER is, and it's not referenced in the list that you just showed us as to what that abbreviation means.
Where are you seeing CER?
In the application that you were looking at, it was either CER or CFR.
Hold on. Whoop. OER.
Oh, an OER.
Yeah.
All right. Well, is that referenced in the O section?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Oh, okay. There he is.
Yeah, yeah. Office
My
of
apologies.
Environmental Remediation, I believe is what it stands for.
Okay.
But yes, good point.
Sorry about that.
Yep. Lots of acronyms in our world. Yeah, but everything that's showing up as required documents should definitely be in that list. And if you find one that's not in there, I would love to know.
No, it was more a matter of just like the abbreviation didn't show up where I thought it should be, and then I had no idea what it was.
Yeah. Understood.
Okay, great. Thanks.
All right. So that's all of the different sections on the application itself. I wanted to run through what you would need to get that letter of completion, because of course that's what we want all projects to get to. We either want it to have a letter of completion or a certificate of occupancy, depending on what is required for that filing. So in order to get a letter of completion, the application needs to be in permit entire status. And this is actually one thing that I want to point out while we're here. So up here on this guide here, you have a status called permit issued or permit entire. And I wanted to point out the difference between permit issued and permit entire. So if you have a job filing that has multiple work types, you have a filing that is GC, ST, and FO, and you pull a GC permit, and you still need to pull an FO and an ST, your status is going to be permit issued. You need to have a permit pulled for every work type that is on a filing. So in this case, this filing is only GC. So once I pull the GC permit, it's going to flip to permit entire. But if I had the work types as GC, ST, and FO, it is not going to show permit entire until I have a work permit for all of those work types. It could be a combined permit. It could be a GC, ST, FO permit, and that's fine. And it'll be permit entire and you're good. But if it's only the GC and I haven't pulled the other work types, it's not going to be permanent entire. And then once you go for LOC, you're not going to be able to get the LOC because it's not going to be complete. It needs to have permanent entire status, and that permit needs to be signed off. So the first step is that the application is in permanent entire status. The cost details need to be added to the PW3 tab. All required documents have to be submitted. The final technical report that I was showing you, it needs to be certified if that's the case, or if it was an application that was being inspected by the Department of Buildings, then it needs to be pass final, and the work permit status needs to show as signed off. So when you were looking at the work permit in DOB Now, that work permit status needs to say signed off, and you have to have all HB permits in approved status. So all of these things have to happen in order for you to request an LOC.
So it sounds to me like if you're not sure of all the work types when you're doing your initial application, you're better off doing them as subsequents because you can't add or subtract once you get to a certain point.
That's right. That's
Okay.
right. Yeah, because if you had a subsequent filing with a work type and then you decide you don't need that work type, then you could just, delete that application or withdraw it.
Okay.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So that's how you request the LOC. The LOC, as I mentioned, can be requested by the owner or the applicant. It's done on the filing action column of the job filing itself. And once the LOC is issued, it is emailed to all the stakeholders on the filing, and it can be printed from the job filing or in the public portal. The other thing I wanted to mention is that a final inspection is not required anymore for temporary construction equipment. And the way that you get an LOC for temporary construction, this is for fence, sheds, supportive excavation, supported scaffold, or PMM, is you're going to submit a notification that you're removing whatever the equipment is. So it's a notification, and once that notification is submitted that it's been removed, the system will automatically sign off the permit and issue the LOC. So I just wanted to point that out, that was a different way of getting your letter of completion. That's only for temporary construction. And you can see that here under requests, you can request, under notifications, you can see all the different notifications that you can request. And so if you were to submit a request that you were removing the fence, once you submit that notification, the permit is signed off and the LOC will be issued. So that's a different way of getting the LOC for these work types. And that's the notification. And then if you're having to do a certificate of occupancy, then that's a whole presentation different about how you do it. There's a request process. So there's this link to a presentation if you need details about how to request your C of O. A couple more sections of the application I just wanted to run through. Actually, this is the last one, is the statements and signatures. So the actual application itself has the statements and signatures section. The applicant of record, this is where they are attesting. There's sometimes a question here about commissioning. This is where you can indicate it. And then the owner's attestation, this is an important part, that if you're saying yes to the building containing one or more occupied dwelling units, that's going to trigger the tenant protection plan. So if a project needs a tenant protection plan, it is entirely based on the answer to this question in the owner's attestation, indicating whether there are occupied dwelling units. And once you click yes here, then it will require you to submit a tenant protection plan that's done from the dashboard. It is it's usually a different PE or RA that is doing that, and it needs to be approved before the permit can be pulled. So that's a different selection here. And the other piece that we didn't go through because it's not necessarily part of this PW1 process, but the site safety plan is also something that might trigger based on the different selections that were made in the application. And if that is the case, then a site safety plan will also have to be submitted and approved before you'll be able to pull the permit. But I did want to point out that in the owner's attestation, it is this question that is determining whether a tenant protection plan is required.
Yeah, Jody, one thing, I thought you just have to follow the tenant protection plan, that it didn't have to be approved before your permit was issued.
It does, when I say approved, it only goes through a QA review, but it is submitted to the department and we do select it as approved. So it does go through a QA step.
Thanks.
If you have information that you need to give to owners, I wanted to point out that there is a guide for you to do that. So one of the resources that's on that resource page is a statements and signatures quick guide. So if you are walking an owner through how to provide their statements and signatures on an application, this guide will give them that information. So hopefully you don't have to do so much of the hand-holding. So it tells them how to log in, how to search for a job, how to go to the owner's attestation, how to select it. And then it also explains what the different sections are that is part of the application. And also gives them a place to go to sign up for an e-filing account. So if you're working with an owner and want to give them a resource, this is a good one. Okay, that brings us to the end of our guide. There were a couple more resources that I wanted to point out for you. The short links, I think, are helpful. So if you're trying to get to some of these quickly. So our inspection system, which I did not go through here at all, this is the short link for that page. That's where you request the development inspections for a project. And there are resources available on that page. I will let you know that the inspection system is not going to be around forever, hopefully not much more for maybe in a year. We're planning to build everything that's in inspections to be part of the build system, because inspections is running on a very old system and requires you to use a very old browser and things that are not particularly friendly. So if you have used full demolition at all in DOB Now Build, the full demolition inspections has been built into Build, and so it will be very similar for how all inspections will work. You will go only into the build record and you'll be able to request the inspection from there. You won't have to go into this separate system. But for now, this is the link to that separate system. And then I give the short link here for codes because I think most people don't know that this is a short link, but to get to all of the code pages on the Department of Buildings website, you can use this short link, nyc.gov/codes. And I wanted to show you on that page that it does actually give you links to a lot of the other things that you might be looking for too. So it gives you, of course, all of the codes, but it also gives you the links to the buildings bulletins are here. And I guess maybe the service notices isn't on here. I felt like it was. Oh, yep. If I go to buildings bulletins, then see executive orders, PPNs, local laws, rules. The other thing that I wanted to show you is how you can get to service notices. So service notices is over here under upcoming changes. So if you're on the front page of DOB Now's website and you go over here to upcoming changes, then you can see all of the service updates. And then if you're trying to find one and you're having trouble, you don't remember when it came out or whatever, you can do this expand all and then if you do Control F on your dashboard, on your keyboard, you can search for any word. Like I was looking earlier for service notices about site safety. So I could just type in site safety. The one thing I wanted to point out about this page is that the current ones are listed here when you first come to this page, and then past service notices, so anything from prior years, is this link down here. And then if I expand all and I do Control F, then I can see, you know, it'll search for any of the keywords that I need. So that's how you find service notices. Then I wanted to just quickly look at those resources that I was showing to you on the other page, which is, I have too many windows open. There we go. So as I mentioned, you click here on resources on the DOB Now homepage, takes you to our resources page, and the other things that are here. So is that job statuses document that I went over at the beginning. I have something called release notes. So every time we do an update in DOB Now build and you're wondering something new looks in the system, or we fixed the bug or whatever the case may be, I'm adding it to these release notes so that it's a presentation, has a slide for each change that is made. So if you're looking for a recent change that we made or something that might have happened a little bit longer ago, you can look here to see all of those updates. That quick guide, that's for owners that I mentioned. Also in here is a link to our FAQs. There are a lot of FAQs. Sometimes search here. You can do the Control F thing in the FAQs as well, to keyword search and find any information that you need. If it's a question that you're having about an application, it's likely that somebody else has asked that question already, and we have already added it to the FAQs, so definitely use that as a resource. The user guide is what I just went through. That's the PW1 guide. The list of technical reports, documents that can be waived and deferred. There's also this guide for supersede and withdrawal. And this goes through if you're trying to supersede or withdraw any of the stakeholders in a filing. This gives you a step-by-step about who can do it, how that affects the filing status, if there's a fee, does DOB review it, all of the very detailed information about what you're trying to do if you're trying to supersede or withdraw something on an application. This will give you the guide on how to do that. So I wanted to point out that resource as well. And that should be everything on here. Yep, that's all of the helpful links.